Interview. Today I'm sitting down with one of our original first guests, a DC2 Designs, Dick Claveloux. He's the head, I guess, designer at GMS. Is that the best way to describe it?
Yeah, my technical title is graphics production manager, but ultimately I handle all the designs. So either way you want to call it.
I was about to say your formal title sounds a lot cooler than mine. Like he designs stuff, he does stuff.
Yeah,
I guess so. Jumping into it, last year you joined us, and we talked a lot about your past with Waltrip, with BK Racing and such. But currently, you're with GMS. Tell us a little bit about how you made that jump from, I guess it would have been BK Racing to GMS.
yeah, it was really different going from a cup team where I was not only doing the design, the installation, printing the wraps, and also tire carrier on the weekend. I had to go into solely a design and production type role. It was hard going from a very physical job to a desk job, um, and a whole new group of people. I hadn't been in the truck series in about 6 years, so a lot of new faces. Everyone I knew was kind of in the Cup series at that point, so it was a big learning curve. Um, Not to mention learning truck bodies. Designing trucks is much harder than designing cars. Just the way the body lines work, the way the wraps work, honestly, is way different than a cup car. So it was a big learning curve, but I enjoyed it, and GMS made it simpler than I think most would have.
Mm-hmm. So one thing with the truck series returning to Darlington last year, as well as being there this year, we've really gotten to see GMS shine with their awesome throwbacks. Is that something that, like, as an organization, you have the owners and the drivers all pitching ideas, or is that something that, as a designer, they kind of approach you and say, "Hey, what do you want to do with this?"
Yeah. So the one thing I like about my position is I can reach out to people and get their ideas. I don't always think my idea is the best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even the people in my department, I reach out all the time for ideas and stuff like that because um, it's hard to come up with all this stuff all the time. Um, I'm sure there's some out there that can, but I can't. But our team president, Mike Beam, he's been in the sport a very long time. He's worked with some of the top names you can think of in the sport, and he loves throwbacks. When we found out we were going to Darlington, we had a meeting the next morning in his office going over what can we do, stuff like that. We reached out to some of the drivers. Um, Obviously, a lot of people know that the drivers pay to drive at GMS, and
Mm-hmm.
so obviously they get an input on what their stuff looks like. Sheldon came to us with the idea for Jimmy Johnson, that truck. Um, Mike really wanted to run the 21 Wood Brothers scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we kind of collectively came up with the 24 scheme, the Ricky Hendrick, but
Yeah.
with that we had to, obviously out of respect, um, get Rick Hendrick's blessing and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think what else did we do? The 221, 20, the 23 was the Davey Allison
Mm-hmm.
throwback, and then the 26, the Junior Johnson. Yeah, so really that was just a roundtable meeting of, what do you think we could do, and stuff like that. And then this year, um, uh, Truex management had approached the idea of Talladega Night stuff,
Yeah.
and they weren't. We tried the Laughing Clown,
Mm-hmm.
which actually I worked with Harris Lou Creative with
Mm-hmm.
on that one. He recreated the logo, which was at some point I hope I get to share some of this stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
he recreated the Laughing malt liquors to Laughing Lyuta, and
Mm-hmm.
it was trippy to see this thing all put together. Um, they weren't a fan of it. They said maybe we go a different route. I was like, do you think they'd like to see the Wonder Bread version? Nobody had done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Busch had done the Wonder Bread cart, but it wasn't an actual throwback. So I wanted to do it right. And
Yeah.
obviously, Sam Bass, that's you got to do his stuff right. If you're going to recreate it, do it right. Obviously, it's tough transitioning from an old Cup car, the old Chevy Luminas
Mm-hmm.
to a truck body was tough. Let me tell you. But they went for it, so I was happy to have a small part in that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones that, man, I can't tell you how many different versions of everything we did this year because we had so much more time.
Yeah.
Especially the 24, we were going through that transition with Lassard. I
Mm-hmm.
actually had a Perrier
Mm-hmm.
version to go
Oh
with the
wow.
Landa. I did a GMS racing version of that. Again, I'm hoping at the end of the year, I'm trying to get clearance to release some of these
Mm-hmm.
for everyone to enjoy. I had done an Old Spice version just to see, for GMS Fab.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of renders this year, and it basically came down to, some the drivers got to pick, some they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Sheldon came up with the Leffler idea. He threw a couple different Leffler schemes at me, and I ultimately went with the red, white, and blue one.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would pop better on the track out of the other ones. Easier to produce. It's a
Yeah.
one-off race, so you still want to keep in mind, how do I do this and not bankrupt the company?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's always my job. How do I do my job and not cost the
Mm-hmm.
team a bunch of money? So it creates a lot of extra work, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows the difference. They just see what the final product is, and if they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah, I think that's what was cool is we actually got to take our first trip to Darlington for that race, and I love the truck series. So for me, it was cool where I saw like Derek Krause's throwback to Waltrip because I was like, man, that was when Waltrip's DI Napa cars when I really just latched on to NASCAR, and then I saw like y'all's with Leffler's. But what's really cool is when you see stuff like the Wonder Bread throwback with Tyler, and you would like I heard people in the stands that they may not know oh Waltrip or this guy or that guy, but I mean how many millions of people have seen Talladega Nights? So there's so many people around
Exactly.
me that were like, "That's Ricky Bobby. That's Ricky Bobby's car." And
You know what? Surprisingly, not a fan favorite in the garage.
really,
They all want to see like true traditional throwbacks, like
yeah,
the guys on the team and stuff. They're like, I don't know, it's a movie. How's that a throwback?
mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to kind of critique it, and I'm like, no, I'm telling you, it's gonna be great. Okay, dear. Yes, I'll be in just a minute. Okay. Go finish your show, and I'll be in a couple minutes. Okay.
Just a little guest appearance.
What's that?
So just a little guest appearance.
Yeah. The joys of working at home.
Yeah, so is that something that people end up coming around to, or because I know like with Junior, he's always been like you got to have the number, you got to have the colors, you got to have the stripes or the flames everywhere. Is that something people kind of come around to, or is it still, like it's just a movie?
Uh, yeah, to a lot of the guys in the shop, they're just like it's a movie,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I guess just being in the sport so much, people view it a little bit differently.
Yeah, which I know that movie as a whole, there's people that I've known like within the sport of NASCAR that didn't care for it because I guess in their mind, they're expecting Will Ferrell to do like a true to life documentary, but I was like, I know
They
that's not
wanted to
coming.
see, uh, uh, a real life type scenario. Like
Yeah.
it was meant to be a comedy, and even being in the sport, I think it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know some of the guys that were in the movie. Um, one of them was my coach for a while, Sean
Mm-hmm.
Pete. He's the guy that unplugs the jukebox.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was on the pit crew with him, um, and he talks about filming the movie, like how great Will Ferrell was just as a human,
Mm-hmm.
who at the time was, you know, that was a big star.
Yeah.
You know, he still is, but I mean, at
Yeah.
that point, he was probably at his peak.
Now, so you moving on. One thing that I've wondered is, it may sound silly, but to me, there are good-looking, whether you want to call them sponsorless or blank rides, and to me, there's bad-looking ones. And I feel like when I look back at BK Racing and with GMS, there's been blank cars on the track that have looked great. Is that something that that there's is intentional, or is that something as a fan that I'm looking way too far into it?
Um, well, I've actually heard that from a lot of people, and I'm happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even some of the more simpler things you could do,
Mm-hmm.
with a sponsor or without. Um, I always want something out there that people are going to notice,
Yeah.
um, regardless of having a sponsor or not having a sponsor. Um, and I would actually, like at BK, um, I name a lot of my cars. The two that I remember the most for the Falcon and Red Wing
Mm-hmm.
cars that I had done. Well, those were designed in a way that, based on the chassis that we had.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a handful of chassis that were primered black, and then we had some that were sheet metal and needed to be wrapped. So the Red Wing car was the black car, and just had cut graphics on it. I could produce that kit for that car very, very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
The other cars, obviously, we had to wrap to get on the track. So I kind of took that scheme and went, one click further to make it a full wrap to put it out on the track and hopefully be appealing enough that sponsors would enjoy it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe hop on board.
Okay.
So that's kind of my thought process behind it.
Yeah.
Some people don't see it that way, um, but that's kind of always in the back of my mind when I'm putting those things together.
Yeah, because it's funny because like I said, I would sit there and I'd be like, is it something that I don't know if it's the font or if it's the shade of this color or whatever, but it would also make me just think about how kind of like I think a lot of times when people bring up their favorite paint schemes or the most iconic, a lot of them didn't have a ton going on. It was just this simple stripe right here, or this simple little thing right here, and I was like, maybe that's something to it that like you're not overthinking it.
Yeah, it's really hard because sometimes you really want to you'll learn a new trick or something
Mm-hmm.
like and you'll be like, how can I fit this in there? And it's like, well, you have to harness that energy and be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, does this actually make it better, or does simplifying it make it better? And more times than not, I prefer going the simpler route.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my drivers prefer more. They think more is better, and that's
Yeah.
what they like, and they're paying for it. So I'll, Sheldon likes a lot of lines.
Mm-hmm.
He likes a lot of movement. Um, uh, Zane Zane likes to think outside of the box a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and both of them really just let me do my thing with it, um, and it's a lot of fun. But it's not necessarily my style,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So I think you see more of my style when there's not anyone telling me what to do
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. So that would be a sponsorless car or Um, Perhaps one that I'm doing that the sponsor is making the calls.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll give you creative liberties, especially smaller sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the benefits I had at BK. Was a lot of the sponsors were pretty small, and they'd let you kind of do your deal. But obviously, bigger sponsors like Allegiant
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, they're very picky. They, and that's their job.
Yeah.
It's their company. So ultimately, you want to do what they want. But one that sticks out to me was Midnight Moon.
Mm-hmm.
That was a fun one to do. They didn't give me anything on it. I just kind of went with it, and they were really happy with the way it turned out. And at the end of the day, I got a winning die cast out of it. So.
Man, that's always the goal, and I guess kind of building on that, like we said, you had the journey from a BK Racing, which I guess would be kind of where you really got to be able to start designing cars, if I remember correctly, to GMS, and what has kind of the journey been like, as a designer, to just simply get that thrill of, man, my design made it to a racetrack, to now seeing, man, my design is in victory lane at Phoenix. We just won the championship with it.
Yeah, that was a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say I probably got more emotional during that than I did winning championships on the pit crew.
Wow.
Because I had 3 championships while I was doing pit crew stuff for KBM.
Mm-hmm.
We were, hired guns to do pit stops for them through Waltrip.
Mm-hmm.
So won a lot of races with them. I want to say it was probably about 20 races I won with KBM over 3 seasons
Mm-hmm.
and 3 championships. But not only start winning races, which is cool because you get a lot of messages from people, which is super nice.
Mm-hmm.
Especially other designers, because they know what goes into just getting something on the track.
Yeah.
It's not a concept. It's hours and hours of work and emails and long phone calls and getting bothered all hours of the day and night. A lot of times doing stuff you don't necessarily think's right, but they're the client and they get to say, So, getting to be on board with working with Chevy on a design, and Sheldon was a neighbor of mine.
Mm-hmm.
We've become friends. So all in all, that was a big moment for me to see my friend win a victory lane with my design on the truck, and it was kind of surreal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, it's just cool when you see stories, like all these ups and downs. And I really recommend people who are listening to this to go check out the one last year. But to me, it is so cool when you see where those stories turn out, and for you, it becomes you're at BK Racing, things are this turmoil, things are all this stuff, and then you end up at GMS, and a little bit later you're now in victory lane, and your die cast is on the shelves at Walmart.
Yeah.
Which I guess is such a southern thing to say, but like within context of, oh yeah, die cast there. So I guess that's the dream, is to end up at Walmart on the shelf.
Exactly. It is. It really is. It's a strange goal, but it's all us designers have that same goal, I'm sure.
So finally, I gave you the question: what's your Mount Rushmore of NASCAR paint schemes? This can be the ones that you think are the 4 best ever, or your personal 4 favorite, or whatever.
So, when I heard this question and I thought about it a lot, I couldn't help but think of designs that really struck something in me,
Mm-hmm.
as far as creatively, and just inspired me. Um, you know, I'll end with my overall number one, but from a guy that produces graphics,
Mm-hmm.
and the headache that is creating a wrap to work on a car and stuff like that. This one scheme comes to mind. There was the NOS Energy Rowdy car that Kyle ran in the Xfinity series.
Yeah.
It was probably the most expensive wrap that I've ever, you know, seen on the track personally.
Really.
When I learned what went into it, so there's several layers to it. They would actually print a checkered flag onto metallic silver, overlaying on top of a matte black wrap, and then would add several silver metallic and fluorescent orange overlays and accents to this car. DA1 Design had done this one. He does a lot of stuff for Kyle and comes up with some really cool designs. But this one in particular, I mean, it has to be 3 to 4 times the cost of a normal wrap.
Mm-hmm.
That's all printed in and stuff like that. So, like, in my head, on the production side of this and making this happen, it was like a super cool design to me. So it's always stood out as one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go to this guy, Ben P. Designer. He got to do a design for Carl Edwards as a subway car, and more so Carl Edwards version than the Suarez version
Mm-hmm.
that he had done with the yellow. While I was learning as a designer and starting to reference stuff to kind of see where my style was at and what really struck something in me, this one stood out a lot. It was like I had already dreamed this type of design up,
Mm-hmm.
and he put it on the track and executed it in a way that is just a beautiful car. So that one's always stood out as one of my favorites. Then Brendan Dropo, the 48 Slants car, the Lowe's Slants car. I forget what year it was, but I just love that car. Everything about it. It's very simple. It's using great lines. I love the color combination. I'm a big fan of the blue, silver, and fluorescent yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to beat that color combo, to be honest with you. But yeah, that car is probably my number 2. And then number 1, the first car I ever drew, just as a fan, is Mark Martin's Valvoline car, the original.
Mm-hmm.
It's just perfect. It's clean. It's classic. I love the way the numbers go with the design and follow the body lines of the car. It's just, and I literally have a picture I drew of it when I was probably 5 or 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was a huge Mark Martin fan growing up, but that one is my top Mount Rushmore, paint scheme.
Man, that's what's awesome is as you're saying these, I'm looking them up, and I think that's what's so cool is sometimes as a fan, I get so focused on, oh cool, they put a Napa sticker on this car, or whatever, instead of being like, well, what's underneath this, what's going into it. And to me, I see it as almost like, if I guess as someone who's never done design, never done the print out or whatever for a car, I see it as almost like I go to my printer right now and I can print out like a picture of Mark Martin's car, or I can print out a blank piece of paper and it's just as easy without realizing, oh, there's people out there that are layering stuff. Because I know even with Justin Allgaier's car, I think that when he was on the Dell Junior Download, they talked about how there's this process to get. I'm wanting to say it was either like the number or like the fluorescent orange or red on his car. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, I thought that was just a color you just randomly pick out. I didn't think there's, oh, we have to mix all these colors together and all.
Yeah, it's a big process, especially when you're dealing with companies that are very specific about their branding and their coloring and stuff like that. And there's a lot of different tricks to do it. I know right now that there's been Ganassi experimented with printing on metallic substrate a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good, but I feel like Stuart Haas has really honed in on that. They started, I believe, a 41 car.
Yeah.
A few times they've run on metallic silver, which is really cool. And that's tough because you're taking the color that you're given, the Pantone color, and you're printing it on a substrate that is not white. So therefore, the color is not going to come out the proper Pantone. So trying to get your end product to be the right Pantone is a lot of work. I had hard times with it just printing on white material.
Mm-hmm.
The Dr. Pepper 202C Pantone is a nightmare for print. It comes out a very milky, brownish red. It does not look like Dr. Pepper. And I spent days printing out samples and swatches to try and get the colors just right to print. And we didn't even start the season with the color that we ended with. If you look over pictures from 2017, the Fangs car that I did for Dr. Pepper, if you look at Daytona, we were Earthwater. So I'm guessing Fontana was the first time we ran it. To the end of the season, probably at that point. At some point, Corey LaJoie was in it. I think he was in it towards the end of the year. So probably when Corey was in it, the color had changed. I changed it throughout the year to brighten it up, to make it look right out in the sun and on the car, because sometimes that plays a big part in it too. Just going out west, the sun in Phoenix and Las Vegas, it reflects off the cars way differently. So a lot of times I have to brighten up certain colors just for those racetracks. Schluter orange and gray, when I was doing those colors, I always had to brighten it up for the West Coast races because the sun kind of dulls the look. It's really weird, but it's just one of those things that you kind of pick up on after doing it for so long.
Man, yeah. After all this talk, I'm gonna have to go grab me a Dr. Pepper, go try to find me a Earth Water. I think those things, I don't even know if they're on Amazon anymore.
I don't think they exist anymore.
I remember y'all had the like super obnoxious bottles of it at BK rate. This is when it was like, it was shaped like a cylinder, but then it was like shaped like the earth on the top of it. I remember bringing those things home.
It was an interesting bottle design. And they actually had me come in and redo the labels from their original one to whatever their last label was. That was the one I designed for them. But they were not changing the bottle design, just the labeling. They loved their bottle design.
Yeah, I don't see them on Amazon, so I don't foresee them coming back any Earth Water throwbacks anytime soon.
I think they went bankrupt. I'm not sure.
There you go.
I think they ceased to be.
Well, there you go. If you're a listener, if you find some Earth Water on eBay or whatever, there's a little collectible for you.
Yeah, hang on to it. Might be worth something someday.
But yeah, thanks again for joining us. Yeah, I really appreciate get to sit down. I told the story last year, but we actually met years ago when I just happened to wander into BK Racing when the shop was a ghost town, and you took the time to sit and chat with me as a fan, and it's people like yourself that to me make NASCAR such a great sport is because it's super easy for you to say get out of here or to hide in the back or whatever, but it's people like yourself and other people I've met throughout the years that's taken that time that's really made me love the sport because it feels like you're in this family, whether you're designing cars, driving them, or just sitting in the stands cheering on your favorite drivers. So I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. I've enjoyed the interviews, and just hanging out, talking candidly with you. True fan of the sport, which always makes conversation easy, in my eyes.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks again for joining us. I guess real fast for the people listening to this, if they want to learn more about you or your designs, where can they find you at online?
Best place to look me up is Instagram at DC2 Designs. Um, Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk uh, to fans of the sport and stuff like that. So, um, that's the best way to look at my stuff, I guess.